Hi, I'm Ian Brown, Managing Director of Excelpoint. Welcome to On Point, a new series of podcasts brought to you by Excelpoint. For those of you who haven't heard of Excelpoint, we're a global leader in the development of no-code technology. We help businesses all around the world to update outdated business processes, overcome their business challenges, automate workflows and streamline their processes. We do this by implementing innovative, automated and highly flexible, adaptable no-code software, typically approximately 10 times faster than bespoke software. Today we're joined by a key worker, if ever there was one. Someone that in the shadow of the COVID pandemic has kept hospitals, businesses, schools, dentists, you name it, supplied with medical equipment and various bacterial sanitisers such as hand sanitizer, which have been so important in the fight against the virus. And that's Managing Director of Aura Infection Control, Laura Edgar. Laura, welcome to you today and thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So Laura, you're one of the businesses in the current climate who have benefited from what's happening in the world today as the pandemic. What changes has it brought to Aura Infection Control?
I suppose it's meant that we've had a huge influx of new customers. We've been very fortunate. We've been able to help a lot of new people in new markets. It's definitely brought with it its challenges. Trying to scale up to manage the influx of new customers has been difficult at times, and certainly one of the challenges that we faced, and had to utilise the technology that we have in order to do that more effectively during the pandemic. And as things start to settle down a little bit now, we're able to see in these markets new opportunities and new areas where we can help customers in really diverse areas now.
So I understand that your conventional market was predominantly dentist practices.
Yeah.
So are you at liberty to state, what sort of new customers and new markets that you would have never addressed before have come along?
Yeah, absolutely. During the early stages of the pandemic, all of the dental practices in the UK closed for a period of time. So we were able to support all of the dental practices to close down safely. There's lots of things that they need to do in order to do that. And then we were left really with no choice but to go and see if we could find other areas to support. And that was, there was lots of things in the news. So care homes needed lots of support in the early days. Some of the NHS trusts and hospitals needed access to specific PPE and things like that. But wider than that, some of the football clubs in the UK have needed some support in opening up safely as well. Some of the emergency services, so helicopter emergency bases on some of the highlands and islands have also needed some support. So it's been really diverse, and for us a huge learning curve to understand how COVID has presented challenges to each of these different places in a completely different way, albeit, the same level of challenge.
Oh boy. So going from dentists to helicopter pilots in the Highlands.
Yeah, very different.
It's very different. So digitising your business, I know this process for you started, I'm going to say approximately 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Has that helped you during this period?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. The fact that we have a completely digitised system throughout our business meant that we weren't forced to close when the pandemic hit, because we were able to take everybody and relocate them into their homes and keep them safe, so we could keep operating because all of the systems are online. Before we had the digitised system, it just couldn't have worked. We had spreadsheets that wouldn't have been shared. We had manual records. We couldn't have picked orders in the same way. It would have been impossible. So
probably fair to say you've been able to take advantage of opportunities that have come along and pivot as a business. Whereas if you hadn't digitalised your business, you'd have probably been more of a casualty. Not necessarily, in a significant way, but you would have suffered rather than benefited.
Without a doubt. I mean, I don't think we would have as you say, been a casualty of it, but I think we would have had to shut the doors and utilise the furlough scheme, and as it was, we were able to keep operating, keep open throughout all of last year, keep everybody working and busy safely, but keep everybody busy. And I think that went a long way to support our team's mental health as well, so they weren't all sat at home on furlough. I think they've been much happier having worked through it. And we certainly couldn't have done that without the process that we went through.
Yeah. So for clarity, for this podcast, you're a customer of Excelpoint.
Yeah.
Not all podcasts will be. So have you found the adoption of no code as a methodology, a platform, a business tool in your armoury has given you the flexibility to change and adapt and meet these challenging circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the system, as it is today, is not even the same as it was when it was first it was first conceived as an idea, or when it was first launched. We've continually changed and adapted our system to meet what the business needs at any given time. And because it's no code and because it's so easy to tailor and tweak and change, certainly this year, as we've had to do so much changing, it's been seamless to be able to make our system fit what our business needs.
Right. And because you're now addressing multiple different markets, has that also raised the profile of our infection control and maybe, I don't know, allowed you to deliver different levels of services into those marketplaces, not just your conventional operation as was before pre-pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Our core offering in terms of products hasn't particularly changed. We're quite a specialist in infection control. So, what a dental practice needs to manage their infection control is quite specific. But some of the disciplines are generic. So hand washing and hand hygiene is a universal standard that everybody should know how to do. And certainly we've been able to bring hand hygiene training to the forefront in some businesses that may not have traditionally brought that as part of their health and safety for their teams. We've been able to maybe utilise the offering and move it into new markets. We haven't necessarily pulled any new product offerings or anything like that.
No. So you've been able to pivot and adapt your business sectors that you're addressing, some of the services that you're addressing, all of your internal business processes, because I should imagine dealing with a Premiership football club, a helicopter operation versus a dentist are very different in the way they do things, but still in your area of specialism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Not being a massive football fan, more rugby, but I'm not averse if you've got a box at Manchester United or anything like that, go in spare. A good social occasion is never passed up.
Absolutely.
What do you think are the coming challenges? So we've had this pandemic now for quite some time.
Yeah.
It may last years. It may only last a period longer, but economically it's going to have a long-term impact.
Yeah.
What do you see as your challenges as a business and how you will start to adapt and address those?
I think probably twofold. One, we're going to see a change in terms of how we operate with the home working and coming back to the office, working out in territory, working from home. I think that's changed fundamentally in the country, and I'm not sure we're going to 100% go back to how we were, which I think is going to have some negative consequences, unfortunately, for different premises and town centres and things. But I think certainly for us, the fact that we have the software that we have and we have the flexibility that we have, it's hard to justify undoing something that has seen such good benefits for my team, giving them a much better work-life balance and has not interrupted my business process at all. So I think there's going to be the challenge with managing where people are in the workplace. And then secondly, I think some of the heightened awareness that you get during a pandemic which sort of evokes new behaviours in people. So an increase in hand washing or awareness of respiratory hygiene, wearing a mask, things like this. We already know, in the not too distant future, some of these regulations are going to be changing, and we're kind of taking the foot off the gas a little bit. And so I think there's going to be kind of a fade in terms of the habits that have been formed, and I think some of the habits actually have been really positive. We've seen a lot less, general infections because the hand hygiene has gone up in the country and the awareness of infection control. So it'll be interesting to see as we kind of roll back regulation, as we accept COVID as a part of our sort of respiratory menu that we're going to see every year. How we change in our behaviour, and if we retain any of the really good practices that we've developed, or if we throw it all out with the bathwater as such.
Yeah, understand. I think all businesses, us as well, are looking at the future with flexible working. So we've always had flexible working in the business, but I think it's put a much greater focus from the employee. What does flexibility mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean short working hours. It doesn't mean I can be dog walking or babysitting while I'm working, but it does mean getting that work-life balance in place. It's an employer-employee thing now.
Yeah.
It's not a dictation. I know internally when I realise that we might have something going on and something's been addressed out of hours, and you suddenly realise, well, that's because somebody just pulled their phone out of their pocket.
Yeah.
They're maybe at a kiddie's ball pool or something, and log on, have a look, deal with something, and put it back in their pocket, and that's real flexibility at that point. But getting that right will be much harder than just getting it to work at all.
Absolutely.
And I think all businesses, ours mutually, will have those sorts of challenges.
Yeah.
It's also just dawned on me that infection control being in the spotlight for so long, that must have brought in lots of competition for you. So it's great that infection control becomes a focus, and everybody gets better at it and understands it, and you can sell more product. But presumably, you've got a lot more competition now.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, certainly I think everybody knows around, hand gels. There was an explosion of hand gel manufacturers in the UK, which is great on one hand because it's, UK manufacturing is growing, and that's good. But I think the challenges with it and the things to be mindful of is just around efficacy and around suitability, because some of the products that are used are certainly, hand gels and surface wipes and things. They need to be doing and being effective for the purpose, and I think certainly sometimes some of the feedback we've had from some of the hand gels that are maybe very recent, that haven't gone through very much testing, is that we've seen reactions on people's hands, certainly in schools with little little hands using hand gels so often, and there's got to be a balance of using these products and getting the benefit of them. So we've definitely seen new competition. I think it's great that there's more UK manufacturing, but there are things to just be cautious of.
Yeah. So substandard product, or even if it's not substandard, how effective is it at killing the germs? But if you're using it very regularly, does it cause skin allergies or eczema problems or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
So when I heard that word, me being a Luddite, I thought we kept swear words out of this podcast, but efficacy is something that's right there, up front and central when it comes to good professional suppliers of infection products.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to know that the product that you are purchasing is going to do the job. It's going to do it in a suitable contact time, and that's the amount of time that the product is on your hands and wet. So if you're not going to stand there for 5 minutes with your hands dripping in hand gel, and it's a 5-minute contact time, it's not going to work. So you've got to have a balance between effective and application, reasonable application time, and that's where you tend to find the bigger brands and the more widely tested products often have a bit of an edge because you get a quicker contact time, but you're not getting any damage to your surface. And ultimately, it's your skin that is your original barrier. You know, if you don't have a full covering of skin, then you've got the opportunity for infection. So it's your skin condition first, then hand washing, and then gel if you can't wash your hands.
Yeah. So as a customer, you've had to put your hand in your corporate pocket. You've had to build a business case, return on investment, however you want to measure that. You've invested in our technology, and we've talked about some of the benefits that's brought in terms of flexibility and ability to pivot and so forth. You might not be able to quantify this, or you might, I don't know. Just in round terms, you see that as a good, positive investment, and I should get a sales plug-in. Are you continuing to invest in technology to drive the business forward and make further improvements?
Yeah.
ROI, return on investment, is really what I'm interested in there.
So I suppose it's relatively difficult to quantify it, but if I think back to, probably I can make 2 points about it. If I think back to our Excelpoint system, we have grown significantly into new markets and in new areas from pre to post system implementation, and we've also been able to get through some of our ISO standards and ISO ratings as well, which we wouldn't have been able to do pre-system. So we've seen steady growth through implementing the system, and we've been able to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do without it. I think the main thing really is during the COVID pandemic and during a point of crisis, we were able to sustain the business, and that for me is the biggest ROI, because had I not invested, we wouldn't have been able to do that, and we would have had to dramatically reduce our footprint, as a lot of businesses are having to do now for potentially a period of years to be able to recover from that. So for me, the biggest ROI is that I didn't have to, and that we're still here.
That's interesting. I know some of our corporate customers can put stats to things and say we've done this many more transactions, or it's had this effect on turnover, or whatever it might be. I think for SMEs, even large SMEs, it's quite difficult to get right down to the quantifiable criteria of ROI.
Yeah.
But what you've said there indicates, perfectly, really. Is there anything you'd like to ask me? It's not a one-way street, by the way. I'm asking lots of questions, but feel free to ask me a question.
I suppose how have you as a business coped with the pandemic and the crisis?
Well, like you, because we're technology based and we use our own technology for all sorts of things, it really didn't impact our working patterns. So we went to home-based working two weeks before the government brought in lockdown. And it hasn't affected us all the way through the pandemic in terms of delivering the services that we do. I think it had an impact on sales. It's taken a long time for the world to get used to remote meetings and remote selling, so that's a little bit different. But as a technology provider, we've always got to be moving forward all the time. You can't stand still in our marketplace, unfortunately. So, we're developing our technology further all the time. And some of that is innovation that's come out of being driven by our client problems during the COVID crisis.
Yeah.
So, we've grown. I think we would have grown more if the crisis hadn't come along. Has it been in any way destructive? No, we didn't furlough people. We continued the operation. Many of the benefits that you've talked about yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's given us a platform for growth going forward.
Yeah.
We, like you, have learned a lot about the marketplace and what our customers want. We've talked about the effect on oral infection control and Excelpoint to some degree.
Yeah.
What about your customers? The use of digital technology, do you think that's helping you to deliver a better end customer experience, or is it largely invisible to the end customer because it's all internally focused?
I think whilst they may not notice, the fact that we have we have the Excelpoint system as our CRM, for example. It's probably the best example. We have it everywhere, but our CRM is probably the best example for this question. Prior to having the system in place, we would basically rely on humans to remember a previous conversation or where we got up to in a sales process, or what the particular pain points of that customer were, or what their focus was for the year or 6 months. And as we were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, initially that worked really well, but as we were getting bigger, it fades over time. You can only remember so many customers and so many names, and we started as a very small business, knew everybody by name, and over the years it became unmanageable, so much so that a customer could ring, have a conversation with somebody, and then a customer would ring back the same day, have a conversation with somebody else, and those two things wouldn't be linked up. There would be no traceability of that, and that was starting to, I think, impact our service delivery. So one of the key benefits really is that our system now allows for monitoring and recording of those key pieces of information in a centralised place, and it means that we've been able to track and monitor what their needs are and what their challenges are. We can look back and see how successful our sales have been, or our service and support functions that we have. It's much more, you get much more clarity, and I think the customer feels more understood as a result of it, and more therefore we have a better sense of loyalty probably with some of our customers. And we have 4,000 direct accounts, but I think a lot of them would still say they know somebody in Aura by name. We know them quite well, because we have a system that allows us to record that.
Yeah, interesting. So some of our customers, like the big players in the technology market, they will keep their customers informed by automated means, whether it's an automatic email or a text message or something like that, as their goods or services go through their process. Do Aura do any of that with their customers to sort of notify them as things are ready or shipped or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. We always confirm orders using an automatic means, so send them a confirmation out, and then again, as it's going through the process, very much as you've described, just to keep them in the loop with it. I think those touch points are really important when keeping them informed about progress, and certainly during the pandemic that was really important, because at times people were placing orders from 4 or 5 different suppliers, so they needed to know what's coming when, and we had so many orders at one point we couldn't have done that manually. It would have been a nightmare.
So you touched on a moment ago how successful your sales process is, etc. I know you're a fan of KPIs.
Big fan.
Rolls eyes to heaven for those who are listening with audio. So I know you measure just about everything in the organisation.
Yeah.
That visibility, has that also allowed you to make decisions, eradicate badly working processes or initiatives that you had that maybe were less successful, and focus in areas where you're being more successful?
Yeah.
So your management information to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know how many KPIs I have. I do try and be a bit more disciplined and not look at all of them, but it's definitely during the pandemic they were invaluable at knowing where I needed to put my attention when there is 2 million things to do. Having that data means you can pinpoint a decision a lot quicker. And then as things start to slow down, it's really helpful to have those data flows to be able to think more strategically about longer term plans. So you can kind of, you can use as much or as little of it as you want. I record everything. One example of where probably you think the recording of the KPIs is an overkill, but was actually really useful, was around our activity monitoring that we do. So everything that happens in the business, every account that's opened, every time somebody makes a phone call or puts an email on, or any of those things, we monitor it. We know that that's happened. And during the pandemic, when everybody went home and was working from home, as a team, we were noticing some of the activity was quite variable for different members of staff. And we were able to look at this data, look at the activity data, and pinpoint where people were not working from home well, where it just wasn't working for them very well, and it was not the right decision for them at the right time. And we were able to use that to then move them back to the office, so that they were still working in isolation in an office, but in an environment that was more conducive. And it turns out that actually having the kids running around in the background just wasn't working. And it wasn't allowing them to get the activity done. So, having that data is really powerful for, for little decisions, but for really big strategic stuff as well.
Yeah. So, I guess if you're pivoting, bringing in, half a dozen new sectors, lots of new customers, the pandemic's raging in the background, there would inevitably be lots of firefighting. And what I'm hearing is, which fires to fight. If you've got all of the data at your fingertips, you can turn that into insightful information to help you make decisions. Those decisions are very focused on the very important factors at that moment in time, so you can react.
That's it, yeah. It just gives you clarity, and it gives you direction, rather than, being overwhelmed with not enough information. The more businesses I speak to, around their data, because I'm a little bit of a fangirl of Excelpoint, as you well know. So everybody gets talked to about my system, and everybody gets shown my system, and it is kind of I look at some businesses and think, how do you cope with so little information and so many spreadsheets? It feels unfathomable now that not everybody needs 1 million reports.
Well, 2 or 3 years ago, you were in the same position.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So you asked about discount, and I'll answer that question. Yep, I'd be happy, based on this dialogue, to offer you some extra discount.
Excellent.
So my last question is going to be, so what are your future plans? Is there anything you can tell us about business, system, technology? What is Aura Infection Control going to do in the next 12 months that you can share publicly?
So at the moment we're looking at lots of quality-based things. We are looking at some of our getting up through our next ISO standards and ratings. We've got quite a lot to do around regulatory things as a business that we have to get through. So that's a whole chunk of work. And then the next stages for us really is looking at how we can utilise the system, as you said earlier, to make the sales process virtually, and where we have to adjust to this, more suitable for the market as it is now. So we want to kind of make sure that as a business we can be as successful as possible utilising technology to do it through a virtual means, because I don't think this is going away. I don't think this is the COVID's last rodeo. I think we're going to be riding this wave for some time to come, and I want to make sure we're resilient enough to deal with any lockdowns that aren't going to happen, that might possibly happen in the future.
That's really interesting from somebody who is a specialist in infection control. This isn't going away. Well, I'd like to thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is. We've kept it clean. We've kept it professional.
Yeah.
We've kept the swearing out of it. And
good.
It's been an absolute delight. And I hope the audience has gained something from our ramblings as we've been through this.
Fingers crossed. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura.